Now we're all set.
Excellent. After the initial grimy haze from the Washington phenomenon started to clear up in the mid-1990s, the pressure point of modern rock careened down the left coast to a familiar state. Of course, the California rock scene never died just because the flannel-clad howlers and thrashers who hailed from the Pacific Northwest were the ones constantly on the MTV airwaves and the cover of Rolling Stone. Jane's Addiction's 1990 album, Ritual de lo Habitual, and the Red Hot Chili Peppers' 1991 record, Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic, were critical contributions in the effort to blur the lines between underground and mainstream rock. But after the brush fire from the grunge movement forever altered the genre and music business, California was cultivating a fresh wave, all their own. Golden State bands were churning out iconic alt records akin to the same frequency my home province produces good-looking blonde women. In 1994, the Berkeley trio Green Day broke through punk's glass ceiling and turned the remnants into diamonds twice over with Dookie. For their third album, Gwen Stefani and the rest of Anaheim's No Doubt spent 1995 exploring through a tragic kingdom. Despite Bradley Nowell not living to see its success, Sublime's 1996 self-titled effort created the quintessential album for a day at Long Beach. In 1997, Blink-182's major label debut ensured their Dude Ranch would not be limited to the suburbs of San Diego. Korn did Bakersfield proud when they exploded into mainstream success in 1998 by Following the Leader, and Rage Against the Machine closed out the millennium and their time together with their epic album, The Battle of Los Angeles. Some states have not produced 6 albums like that in their history. There is just nothing like California music. But one of the most potent albums to come from a 90s California group sold over 11 million copies, despite being distributed on Epitaph Records, an independent label. During this time, the voice and leader of these Garden Grove punks was a white guy with braids who had earned 2 biology degrees from the University of Southern California. Their lead guitarist was an elementary school janitor whose nickname was, and still is, Noodles. And the band's name was inspired from a 1987 horror film titled The Offspring, They Were Born to Kill. In 1994, the Orange County Foursome came out with their third album, titled Smash. Brian Keith, Dexter, Holland's vocal style and song topics drive the eccentric sound piping through this record. He sings in a manic manner, as verses are thrown out on a less rhythmic schedule, and more sputter out when he is goddamn good and ready. His lyrics are coated in a soot that highlights the darker aspects that most people do not associate with this area of the globe. Garden Grove? Mickey Mouse is only a few exits away off the 5 freeway. But Holland bleeds through lines touching on anxiety, rage, frustration, suicide, that there are consequences from indulging with drug-infused rendezvous. And these themes are enhanced by the puncturing guitar shreds from Kevin Johnson Wasserman, the aforementioned Noodles. His screeching, distorted guitar tone acts as the bicep flexing throughout the record. His play walks that tightrope between heavy and energetic. Noodles' unique guitar quality is critical in solidifying the Offspring sound in general, but especially on this compilation. Bassist Gregory David Kreisel, who goes by Greg K., gives the album a critical pulse, as there are many times throughout that his bass line is the most infectious attribute. He gives the record the space that is really, really important, as he gets chances to excel with his bassist's contributions, which often get swallowed up in fast-paced rock records, but Greg K's thumps are too smooth to ignore. Behind his drum kit, Ron Welty serves many key roles. His quick wrists and brilliant sense of timing serve as the foundation for the album. His precise touch on the cymbals and snares keeps the music intact. Not to mention, Welty is the only member of the band who goes by his real name, and that has to count for something. In an era where rock bands were tapping into mainstream fame on major labels, the Offspring were going at things the old-fashioned way. Word of mouth, local radio play, and dynamite music. Hello, I am Chad Jones, and welcome to Don't Scratch the Vinyl, a music podcast where myself, and occasionally a guest, break down an iconic album in its entirety. This show both lays out the historical significance of the record and what music fans can take from the compilation today. I'm recording this episode at Big Night Media's studio in Boston, Massachusetts. Growing up in Huntington Beach, California, Garden Grove was only a 20-minute drive away. and even less if the lights on Brookhurst were cooperating. And beginning around the time I was attending elementary school, I learned about the cultural contributions my home area gifted the world. Two things stuck out in my head. Many famous skate brands like Vans, Volcom, and Hurley all came from Orange County. And my home area has also produced some really sick bands like No Doubt, Social Distortion, and of course, The Offspring. And of the main alt groups, I definitely gravitated towards them the most. The tenacity pumping through self-esteem hit me like a sledgehammer. And it became one of the songs I just simply do not remember living without. And many of their songs have stuck in my ribs at different stages of my life. Come Out and Play, Why Don't You Get a Job, Want You Bad, Gone Away, You're Gonna Go Far Kid, Make It All Right. The list goes on. The music was compelling on its own, but that relationship was only strengthened from the fact these guys grew up just a couple of towns away from me. And that was not the case for many of the Southern California bands who cut their teeth in Los Angeles. While LA was only 30 miles away, it may as well have been New York City. My family did not venture there too often, so while I have a strong connection to many LA bands, it's not as personal as my relation to The Offspring. They were the OC band the world-famous K-Rock played the bejesus out of. More on them later. The Offspring helped show me at an early age just how global my home area truly was. And a key aspect of their ethos was they did not just romanticize the Southern California lifestyle. Believe it or not, it is not always sunshine and rainbows living a few miles from the Pacific Ocean. With Smash's release on April 8th, 1994, The Offspring tapped into that reality and showed countless of people that living in Orange County was not always a Disney fairy tale. So, Smash starts out with a calm 25-second voiceover, as Holland was looking for something Bing Crosby-esque, so they decided to have a voice actor named John Mayer, not that one, give an NPR-style, very reserved monologue. It is actually titled, Time to Relax. It is quite soothing. I enjoy the line towards the end as, after all, music soothes even the savage beast. And then Nitro kicks in. An unbelievable explosion of drums. The high-intensity drive sounds almost like a war anthem. Holland is showing his comfort level of not following traditional lyrical flow. He belts out lyrics at his own unique pace, which plays with the listener's expectations. You're not entirely sure when he's going to be singing next. And the lyrics touch on massive themes from mid-90s culture. Searching for purpose, feelings of disenfranchisement, acknowledging that modern living has shifted dramatically from what their parents went through. And Holland has some advice for this way of living now. You should live like there is no tomorrow. And then you get that scratchy guitar play from Noodles. It's so quick, so precise. There's some excellent pause and play around the middle portion of this song, and that's one thing this album does really, really well. Plays with flow. It is not just a thrashing punk album the entire time when you're completely just swallowed by a wall of sound. There's some great breathing aspects to this record. And Nitro serves as a really, really effective Kickstarter and sets the groundwork for this entire album. Driving over to Bad Habit. The bass line at the start just commands your attention. The intro is very drawn out. It's very dramatic. And then Holland even gives a slight inhale into the mic very early on, as almost like he's prepping. Then the song just erupts like a volcano when he belts out the line of, "'Cause the slightest thing, and I just might snap." You get brilliant flow throughout this song, as Holland often gives a chance to singing, and then the music really breaks into a powerful bridge, right? Incredible buildup and release of energy throughout the song, almost like you are driving on the freeway. Sometimes you get to go way over the speed limit, and other times you're screaming expletives in your car because you're completely stopped in bumper-to-bumper traffic. All musicians get a chance to really contribute and to be heard, right? That's another thing that this album does a really good job of not having the entire set just sound like manic drums and thrashing guitars. There's portions where you can clearly hear Greg K's thumping. There's times when Welty's driving the track, and then, of course, Noodles is the main factor in their music throughout this entire album. So you get many musical breaks for the guys to really show off their skills. So at times with the lyrics, Holland is a little bit sloppy and nonchalant with his delivery. And then other times he's more purposeful, really packs a punch. I especially like the second part of the chorus that goes, "Got a bad habit, and it ain't going away." And then you get to probably the most famous part of this song, is that Holland gives a long, expletive-filled spoken word a cappella. that starts off with, drivers are rude, such attitudes, but when I show my peace, complaints cease. Something's odd. I feel like I'm God. You stupid, dumb shit, goddamn motherfucker. The track already had a massive intensity belting throughout, but then this somehow manages to kick it into even higher of an overdrive. And ultimately, it sums up the song. It's about road rage, right? And how you deal with it. So it's funny. I heard this track actually when I was working for a California radio station in Redlands, 99.9 Cola, and their sister station, 96.7 KCal Rocks, would play pretty hard alternative tracks, right? So one day I was streaming the station online, and this song came up. And then hearing it edited out with all the scratches you have to go through to completely basically cut out the last a cappella portion is quite funny hearing it. This song is definitely made to be played all the way through. You can't have the uncensored version of Bad Habit. It's like watching the uncensored version of Pulp Fiction. What's the point? Now jumping to, next track is Gotta Get Away. Now this is a more traditional alternative rock radio formula for a song, right? You had a great opening from Welty, Greg K, and Noodles, all establishing the music very early on. Now this is a much more structured vocal delivery from Holland, as it's one of the few songs that uses somewhat of a rhyming scheme. Now despite the more stable format, the lyrics are still very heavy. There's demons in my head, and it's more than I can take. I gotta get away from me. Holland does an excellent job throughout this record being vulnerable, as he knows there's problems in his life, but he is at least trying to acknowledge them and attempting to get better. And I think he's a pretty underrated lyricist when you're looking at alternative and grunge punk writers from the 90s. I don't think his name gets brought up as much as it should, as far as really establishing interesting lyrics in the stratosphere of 90s and 2000s rockers. Now, with his vocal delivery, I find it interesting he also gives the lines a little bit more of an apathetic feel, as if this is a dichotomy of showing that he wants to change, sure, but is he really willing to go the extra distance to actually make it a reality? That dichotomy I find endlessly fascinating, right? There's great collaboration with the music, especially during the chorus. It really gives the track an extra awesome power lift. Off to now, Genocide. There's a real prickly guitar intro from Noodles on this one. It's playing like he's almost got wool attached to his fingertips. It's very scratchy. Holland is interested in bigger, darker themes in his writing, especially during this era of the band. War, police brutality, suicide, all of these are covered in their first 3 albums. And just think about it. How many artists would honestly want to title a song Genocide and put it on an album? It'd be a little hard to get that through Walmart's doors, huh? Love the belting out of the 1, 2, 3, 4 right before the chorus. It shines light on the classic punk bands that did that either to start off sets or to ignite songs. I immediately think of the Ramones with Dee Dee counting in the foursome with those iconic 1, 2, 3, 4s with some real pop. It's a great callback. Love that element in the song. And I think also this song does a really good job of highlighting critical elements of defining who the Offspring are as a band. Pretty dour subject, propped up by really fast-paced, intense instrumental play. And I love how the song picks up speed during the choruses, right? Before the second and third ones especially, the track hums a little bit, it's definitely slowing down, and then they hit the gas even harder and just rock right through your cranium. And I enjoyed John Mayer delivering the line of, I especially enjoyed that one. I did too. Next track is titled Something to Believe In. Real slick slides from Greg K and Noodles to kick off this one. This is another prime example of Holland not always following traditional singing structure, right? There is no grid on when he delivers the verses, as the words more just tumble out of him. Almost more like it's spoken word poetry connecting into rock music. And I really enjoy the line of, I believe in a changing of a guard, put our feet on the ground. Now that is technically one segment of singing, if you want to call it one line or one portion, but that is just all the way through. He says it basically without taking a breath in. That's a lot of syllables, right, to go into one line. As he's really looking for something to hold on to in life, right? Again, feelings of disenfranchisement, wondering where you belong in the world. Huge themes of 90s rock. And then Welty and Noodles are playing off each other the entire time, to an absolute T. They combine for a gripping portion for the instrumentals. And the guitar slides allow Greg K to really take control and have his incredible thumping really be the dominant factor for portions of the song. Very impressive. I also enjoy the slight chuckle that you hear on the end of the recording as the song fades out. Now, jumping to the first real big hit from the Offspring, Come Out and Play. That upbeat clicking on the intro really gets the track solidified. And then the iconic line of, "You gotta keep them separated," kicks off the musical tenacity even more so. So that line was delivered by Jason Blackball McLean. He was a friend of the guys from the Offspring. And this track includes some of the most memorable instrumental play on the entire record. Very funky bass line. Gives the song a nice punch. And then Noodles milks out a lot of interesting sounds out of his guitar, right? He just has such a unique tone. You can't stress that enough when talking about anything related to the Offspring's discography. Sometimes his effort is a little bit scratchy, right? More punk rock driven. But then other portions, it sounds almost like an Eastern vibe, something that maybe Led Zeppelin would have screwed around with in the mid-'70s. This song is a wild ride, as Holland's vocals are dancing all through the octaves. So it can be a little hard to decipher the lyrics, as the fast-paced vocals and wall of sound kind of crash into each other, and it can be a bit tricky, honestly, to determine what exactly the song is about and what Holland is saying the whole time. So looking at the lyrics, this song touches on how even kids are not totally safe in the dangers from the world, right? And it took me a little while to grasp that, especially with the song being such an upbeat, fun, productive song. And then you go look at the chorus that goes, "If you're under 18, you won't be doing any time, come out and play." It's almost like an encouraging for kids to just go out and have fun, right? But there's darker undertones connected into the lyrics. It sounds like a plea to allow that to be reality for kids, with lines of not having one become wasted and another to become a waste. One's off to jail, one's off to the morgue. So pretty morbid topics that are connected to a pretty upbeat rock song throughout. So now, we have arrived at the halfway point of Smash, and this is the perfect time to discuss the history of K-Rock and the Offspring. So if you are unaware, indulge me for a bit. 106.7 KROQ-FM in HD Pasadena, Los Angeles, Orange County. This is the world-famous K-Rock. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that intro in my life. So, if you do not know, K-Rock is a legendary alternative rock radio station in Los Angeles. Throughout their history, the station has been responsible for helping boost the popularity of many bands. One of K-Rock's iconic disc jockeys was Jed the Fish, R.I.P. He actually passed away earlier this year. He held the preoccupied, very, very, very effective way and the coveted drive time slot of Afternoon Drive from 1978 until 2012. He held that for a very long time, and he was a huge voice in Los Angeles radio. So he had a recurring segment titled Catch of the Day, where he would introduce new songs and bands over the airwaves. Especially for local artists, it was a massive, massive deal to have Jed the Fish intro their song. Not only were they getting exposure in one of the main markets in the world, K-Rock had heavy influence throughout the radio industry. If they started playing a band, that gave stations all over the country the green light to blast them over their airwaves as well. So local California groups could become nationwide phenomenons. And when Jed the Fish heard the Offsprings Come Out and Play, he could not just keep the song to himself. K-Rock took Come Out and Play and made it something. Noodles said on the podcast, Time to Relax with the Offspring. It was Jed the Fish, actually, played it for his catch of the day. And we got on the phone immediately, called, "Play that again, it was great," pretending we didn't know who that was. But we were trying to get our aunt to call and our moms to call, Holland said on the program. And luckily for us, it just kind of started to work on its own. So, as someone who grew up listening to K-Rock, I can tell you the Offspring are one of the bands I immediately connect with the station. So, of course, being a California group helps strengthen that association. But if someone were to ask me which bands are played the most on the station throughout the day, I would bring them up just as quickly as I would Nirvana or the Offspring. The Smashing Pumpkins are that huge of a connection to them. When you're looking at Green Day and Weezer, I wouldn't separate them. I would just have them all be mushed together. The Offspring are that part of K-Rock's history. So the K-Rock crossover continues as we flip to Self-Esteem, the iconic track. Is there any other song you could think of that has three intro components as dynamic? The sloppy la 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 la, and then the guitar and drums collide to create a punk rock sonic boom. And one of the most alluring bass lines ever hooks you deeper into the electric chair. So you get more toned down singing from Holland as he really taps into his emotive side. That anxiety and desperation you feel when you care more for a person than they do for you. So the song is set in either a casual relationship that Holland has with a girl, or it's a true romantic one. But he realizes he would rather be one of the guys that gets with her than not be with her at all, as it's easier to deal with that pain than being completely alone. So many memorable lines. I could just read the entire song, honestly, verbatim. You get awesome lift from Holland on the different ways he emphasizes yeah throughout the number. Welty is beating his drums to a pulp, like he's trying to get them to produce OJ. His drum fills during the Sleep With My Friends portion are just so fervent. He perfectly captures the being of this song through the drums. And this song does an unbelievable job of just cultivating teenage angst musically, lyrically, and emotionally. The more you suffer, the more it shows you really care, right? He's still questioning if he's right until the very end. It's almost like he's looking for validation with that line. A fascinating look at the manipulative emotional hold that some people can have over people in relationships. And this is told from the perspective of a guy, which makes it that much more unique. Interesting that the title is also self-esteem, when the track is actually about not having any. This is such a physical song for me. Like, when I hear it, it's so hard not to bop along to it with the head nods, air drumming, lip syncing. Also, staying on the K-Rock train, this is one of the all-time songs that the station plays, in my eyes. So, quick little aside. For Memorial Day weekend 2024, K-Rock aired their 500 most played songs in history. And I decided to write a top 10 list of the tracks I most affiliate with the station. So I ranked this number from The Offspring 4th, right in between No Doubt's Just a Girl and the Smashing Pumpkins' 1979. So here's what I wrote about self-esteem at the time. This song has more attitude in the opening 28 seconds than some bands capture in an entire album. That four-headed monster of smooth bass line, thrashing guitar, manic drums, and anxiety-filled lyrics have been exploding out of K-Rock's studio for 3 decades now. The band has said that the station was the first to play their 1994 record Smash, which included legendary alternative rock tracks such as Come Out and Play and Self-Esteem. The mutually beneficial relationship has not wavered throughout the years. An endless barrage of numbers from the Garden Grove Rockers continue to bleed over K-Rock's airwaves. But in a decade where alternative rock bands were popping up all over California, The Offspring was OC's answer to San Francisco's Green Day and San Diego's Blink-182. I am confident the station will always have room for Dexter Holland's admittance that it's kind of hard when she's ready to go. Now, off to It'll Be a Long Time. Before you get a chance to really catch your breath and really get settled back into the record, the intensity just cranked up right again. Holland reverts back to constantly flinging out his lines. The song is about touching on those feelings again, losing hope, feelings of disenfranchisement, right? When will the world listen to reason? I have a feeling it'll be a long time. There is great musical drive leading right into the chorus, balancing out those dour lyrics with headbanging-inducing play, right? Just a classic calling card from The Offspring. The musical layering throughout this number is quite gripping. You get a very tight musical push in the second half of the song, right? That shift to a more deliberate tone is just so intoxicating, I find. Then the pace just keeps moving up a tick faster, a tick faster. To me, that's the best aspect of the song for sure. Love it. I couldn't get enough. The energy is just so relentless during this number. Now, speaking of relentless energy, jumping over to Killboy Powerhead. Now, this is the lone cover song on this record. It was originally debuted by The Digits in 1990, and it starts with just a punch to the listener's nose. The instrumental play shreds this entire number down. Awesome melody throughout, and Holland goes into a higher octave to really drill home this track. The instruments yo-yo back and forth, and again, playing with that pace of play, so critical. It's a very effective punk number, right? And this is about as nasty as this record would get, especially from a musical standpoint. So what I find interesting, too, is despite it being a cover, quintessential Offspring qualities bloom throughout this one, from start to finish. Noodles' one-of-a-kind guitar tone might be the exact thing that you could really pin to describe that, as he gives the song exactly what it needs. And his guitar makes it such an original-sounding composition from The Offspring, which it is really hard to disassociate, honestly, his guitar tone to the Offspring sound. I would find it hard to have other groups really be able to pinpoint the accuracy of notes when playing covers from The Offspring, as unless you have Noodles as the guitar player, it's just not going to quite sound like an Offspring song. And that was the case here, even though they didn't originally write this one. Off to What Happened to You. Now, this is one of the most fun musical efforts on the entire record. Insane rhythm on the drums. The pacing, the fills, all just so immaculate. Great music to bop to, right? It's very fun. And then you take a gander at the lyrics. Holland is sincerely asking someone he cares about what happened to them. They got into drugs, and it has just ruined them. They are now, unfortunately, unrecognizable. Holland is not afraid to touch on the consequences of drug use in his lyrics, which is noteworthy, as many rockers, when they're singing about drugs, are going from the perspective that they were either having a good time using them or now the downside that they're now on the back end. And Holland, a lot of times, taps into these topics with characters in his songs. And it's interesting, as the Offspring themselves do not seem like as big a drug guys as other people in their era, right? Especially considering the fact that Noodles and Holland are still touring with them today. You get amazing control from the up-tempo vocal delivery. And I love the hey shouts throughout. They really add a critical component, right? They're not necessarily angry, but they're very potent. You get a terrific mini solo from Noodles on this one as well. And honestly, this might be Welty's best contribution on the entire album. He is nails. Classic song elements from The Offspring would continue to expand on this idea going forward, right? Pairing an infectious musical effort with a pretty sad lyrical story. This song reminded me a lot of Why Don't You Get a Job, right? Very fun, upbeat number throughout that one, but the lyrics themselves are pretty dark, right? And depressing. And I found this number just completely addictive during my prep. I would be really looking forward to hearing it every time I would listen to the album all the way through. And I even put it on certain playlists when just out and about with my day. Absolutely loved this one. Now it's definitely in the rotation. It's very infectious, you know? It has a beat you just gotta bop along to. Jumping over now to So Alone. Love the reverb and drumsticks being bashed together to start off this one. Just such a visceral blast of energy, right? Now, it's quite jarring when jumping off away from the previous track, right? As this one's only 77 seconds. And I think the best element are the guys screaming out, hey, to puncture the music. Now, there's more venom in these ones than the previous heys on What Happened to You, right? But those snarls fit the tenor of this track. It's so gnarly. It's so raw. And it's quite effective in showing off the band's true punk roots, as when they would find more success in mainstream labels after this record, they would be more associated with just alternative rock bands in general, right? But this side of the album really shows off that they were coming from a true punk upbringing. Off to Not the One. So again, more themes on struggling with the world on this one, right? Holland is pointing out that he did not cause the problems in the globe, but he must deal with them now. Now, this is a little bit more of a positive look at addressing hardships. He belts out lines of, we're not the ones who leave the homeless in streets at night. We're not the ones who've kept minorities and women down. So pretty mature lyrics to go along with pretty compelling music as a whole. And again, Holland is packing a lot of words into each line. Those are just back-to-back lines. That's a lot of syllables there. The syllables to verses ratio is just crazy on that one. But Noodles holds it all together with a simple, slick, incredibly gripping solo as well. And then it's impressive that Welty can keep that rapid tempo throughout this number. Overall, really, really fun one to listen to as well. Now, Smash winds down with a title track that's composed of 4 different elements. So, it starts off with a pretty traditional effort from The Offspring, right? Classic 90s themes, not giving into conformity, being yourself is critical. The really fervent play from the instruments, especially for Noodles or the solo, really drives this number home. Great lift, especially connecting with the lyrics of I Am Alive, which Holland repeats 3 times to end this portion of the closer. So if this song just ended right there and the record ended, it would have been a very, very effective way to close out Smash. But they decided to add some extra elements to it as well. We say again, hello to John Mayer, with the spoken word of, I hope you've enjoyed our time together. You get a nice little outro musical break, pounding drums and high voltage guitar, and then it lays rest for about 5 minutes, right? So if you stick around, you get to hear the secret drums and isolated guitar riff from Come Out and Play. And then that goes for about 1.5 minutes, and then the album fades out. that was a little bit easier to detect on listening to it in streaming, because you could see that the song still has 5 minutes to go, 6 minutes to go. Whereas I would imagine listening to it either in CD or on an album would be a little bit more confusing back in the day. You've had to really be committed and just like forget to flip out the CD or the record at that point to really hear this one. Because why would you really be listening to just dead air for 5 minutes? Now we're off to the categories. So crank it up to 11. Now this is in honor of Spinal Tap, right? The best portion of this album. What part makes you want to just crank up your dial as high as it can go and forget about everything else going on in the world? And I decided to go with the collection of verses from Self-Esteem leading into the ending that starts off with, "Late at night, she knocks on my door. She's drunk again and looking to score." Unbelievable build-up and release of tension during this part of the song. The music, the lyrics, the vocals, they're all swirling together to create a scintillating piece of music. Now, the entire song is awesome, and I really wanted to pick something from this song for this category. And I decided to go with this portion as it really is just building to an absolute climax at the end. I find it very, very noteworthy that whenever I listen to this song, that part jumps out. Off to Reshuffling History. So this is going through the layout of the record and seeing if there could have been any improvements or overall, how's the flow from start to finish. And I like it. I enjoy the spoken word leading right into Nitro. I find that very touching. The smash ending is definitely quirky, but I find enduring, right? The record does flow really well. Now, sometimes too well, as some songs have a tendency to just crash into the next one, and you're not really understanding exactly where they're going with, as it can be really manic at times, right? But it can be great to listen to this album all the way through with no distractions to really understand where they're coming from as an entire storyline. And it can be a little bit tricky, though, deciphering and remembering the order of things. But that makes sense, right? This is a pretty classic, hard, alt 90s punk album. So it makes sense that it would be a little bit harder to decipher each song. Again, this one didn't have many acoustic plays, so. The one thing I would have done to switch up the order is I would have gone Something to Believe In, drop to where Bad Habit is, and then have Bad Habit go right into Come Out and Play and Self-Esteem. As you still would be able to get like a little bit of a more slow burn in the third hole, but then that leads into just an absolute triple-headed monster of Bad Habit leading to Come Out and Play, leading to Self-Esteem. And I think that would have been just unbelievably dynamic in the middle part of this record. Ultimately, though, the flow works really well when I was listening to it all the way. Many times. Reprogramming History. This is where I go through and discuss the songs that have been able to hold throughout time in a critical and commercial sense, right? So, Come Out and Play and Self-Esteem are two of the band's most famous songs, singles, music videos, radio staples ever, not just from this album, right? A lot of people would associate these two songs with The Offspring before they touch on anything else, right? They're that important to them. Self-Esteem has over 112 million views on YouTube, and Come Out and Play has nearly 50 million. So the third single that also had a video for this album was Gotta Get Away, and that one's got 14 million views on YouTube. And I actually heard that on K-Rock this weekend, just in chilling out and getting ready for this episode. So Bad Habit is definitely a radio play, especially for harder alternative stations, like KCAL, right? So overall, I think Time and History got it right with placing Come Out and Play and Self-Esteem kind of in a class unto themselves. And I think that really is important when looking at the entire history of The Offspring, that they were able to produce pretty hard, heavy songs that were still able to be played on the radio once people got a hold of them. And I was looking through just the rest of the songs on here. About 1.4 million to 3.7 million views on YouTube for the other songs on here, right? The tastemakers, I think, were vindicated in real time for sure. I'd be curious on how many people ever listened to this record all the way through and come to the conclusion that, yes, the two big ones would be Come Out and Play and Self-Esteem. Ultimately, if I had to pick one to define this record, I would go with Self-Esteem. Again, completely acknowledging that Come Out and Play changed The Offspring's trajectory for the rest of their careers. But Self-Esteem just has such a manic, youthful, fascinating tone that really just encompasses who The Offspring are as a band, especially during this era of the group. Now, I got to talk about the other gems on this record, as this one is not just completely historic because it had Come Out and Play and Self-Esteem. The awards, starting with the Pulling Teeth Award. Underrated, forgotten, overlooked track, right? This is in honor of the Green Day song Pulling Teeth that is wedged in between Welcome to Paradise and Basket Case on Dookie. And ultimately, it kind of got lost throughout history. But that's why I really enjoy doing this category for each album I do. To talk about that, the fact that there's other impressive, good songs on every album that you can find that is carried by a couple songs that you've heard for decades. So I decided to go with the winner for this one, What Happened to You? I was obsessed with this song during my preparation. I listened to it all the time and had such a physical reaction whenever it would come on, right? Head nodding, air drumming, I had to get involved with it. And that brings an interesting point when I'm listening to music, is the fact that I know that a song hits me when I don't just sit there and just have the music completely just infect my ears, and that's the only thing that I really do, is just sit there. I got to get my head nodding, body moving to it. And this one had me hooked every single time I heard it. I never got sick of it. Now, this song also brings a critical sense of levity into a pretty harsh record, right? Now, it's still got some heavy lyrical content, but the music is much more fun than basically any other part throughout this record. And again, it shines out that the Offspring would tap more into this musical style in the upcoming years. Again, I always associate it now going forward with Why Don't You Get a Job, right? So this is a nice little Easter egg when you're searching earlier through their catalogs. This Ain't Havana Award. So the song that blew you away, the first or most recent time you heard this album. So when I first listened to this one all the way through, last year, when the Offspring were celebrating it turning 30, I don't think I'd ever heard the album all the way through without any distractions, right? So I sat down and listened to it. And the one that jumped out to me then was Killboy Powerhead. And it reminded me of when I was listening to the Ramones' End of the Century record. When I heard This Ain't Havana, I was like, where's this song been all my life? I got to get it downloaded right away, right? Had a very similar reaction, and that's why Killboy Powerhead wins this award. I love the drive and the tenacity just oozing from this number. And I was hooked by Holland's vocal performance as well. It is funny how a year later, a different song struck a chord with me the most. I wonder if just every spring or summer when I play this record all the way through for the first time in a while, if one song just jumps out to me each time I listen to it. Off to the Highway to Hell Award. Best Musical Intro. Shout out to Angus Young of AC/DC for that incredible riff he created on the last album with Bon Scott. I decided to go with Bad Habit for this one, as the intro just teases the listener into an absolute frenzy. It's like the start of Jaws. You know something intense is about to manifest, but you're not quite sure when or how. And that bass line never fails to just reel me in. The Lithium Award. Best Opening Line Off a Song. This is in honor of Nirvana's 1991 single that included the opening line of I'm so happy because today I found my friends. They're in my head. And I decided to go with For Something to Believe In, which starts off with I believe that reality is gone. Disillusion is real. Love, again, the dichotomy of having disillusion be real. Great opening line. And again, it highlights the real frazzled, trying to make sense of the world energy that is winding throughout this entire album. And honestly, this was a pretty easy choice, because I think the most memorable parts of the intros of a lot of Smash would be the musical components, and then maybe the chorus is the best line later on. So I think it was a pretty solid intro, and definitely an easy choice for this award. The Eruption Award, Best Musical Extended Piece, in honor of Eddie Van Halen's iconic Eruption, which came off Van Halen's first record. So I decided to rock with the solo on Come Out and Play for this award. Now, since this is a punk record, right, this effort is not filled with many masturbatory guitar solos, right? That is not what this record's all about. But this simple, clean, unique mini solo on the Offspring's first mainstream hit definitely fits the award for this one. And they've earned it. Noodles was just such a critical drive throughout this entire album, and it shines through on the solo for Come Out and Play. Next one, Tattoo or T-shirt. So this category basically goes into something that I would either permanently put on my body in honor of this album, or at least temporarily. And I was drawn to the video of Self-Esteem when I was thinking about something that could lead to a cool t-shirt or tattoo. As there's a couple of really nice still shots on that video. There's a cool image of a blurry photo of a kid doing cartwheels and a skateboard fading away in the background of a backyard. There's a really fun image, too, of a bunch of kids throwing eggs at the camera towards the end. So I decided to go with a cool image of a skeleton under an MRI machine that's mouthing along to the la 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 intro of Self-Esteem, as I think that would be a really cool design for a band shirt for The Offspring, as it's a callback to the skeleton that's on the album cover of Smash. There it has a little more of a yellow tint to it, right? This one is just straight up looks like an image from an MRI machine. And I think it'd be a slightly more unique garment than just picking the image from the album cover. I'd rock it. Jumping to Nobody's Perfect. Let's pick just a little bit of nits for this album, right? Not much to go after. This ultimately is just going through which song am I least likely to search on its own, least likely to download, maybe one that I flat out don't like. Now, there's not one on this record that I would just flat out get rid of for sure. But if I had to get rid of one on this record, I would choose Something to Believe In. I enjoy the track's message and the instruments for sure, but ultimately, the spoken word delivery just didn't quite hit me the same as it did for other songs on the record that had that kind of vocal delivery. It is still definitely enjoyable. And also, I should be honest here, that this selection has a pretty big part to do with the fact that where its placement is in the album, right? As when you get to that slower part of Something to Believe In, I'm kind of always thinking like, okay, let's go. Let's get this, come out and play in Self-Esteem. I'm always a little bit like ready for the next portion. And so if it was earlier on in the record and you replace that with Bad Habit leading right into to Come Out and Play in Self-Esteem, as I suggested for Reshuffling History, then I really wouldn't have much of a criticism for the song, honestly. And I would have had to maybe choose not the one, as again, the spoken word just didn't quite strike as hard of a chord for me when I was going through this album in prep for this episode. Now, again, I still definitely enjoy those two songs, especially considering the fact that they have powerful lyrics, but this is the nitpicking portion of this show, and just got to be honest, I generally enjoy this album all the way through, but I think if you would get rid of one song just randomly from this record and then played it back to me, I would just be praying it'd be one of those two songs, as I think that the other songs on this record really do a good job of encapsulating the entire ethos of The Offspring. I find the energy and attitude throughout very, very compelling. All right, so now we're jumping to Almost Famous, in honor of that 2000 movie with Kate Hudson, right? This is basically a submission to Rolling Stone. And this is a piece that I write showing why modern music fans should ultimately care about this record and this band at this point of their careers. This is titled, Don't Judge a County by Its Name. When you think of Southern California rock and roll, what immediately pops into your head? I'm sure tunes from the Beach Boys, The Doors, The Eagles, Van Halen, Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and No Doubt quickly come to mind. But I have a feeling your brain will not just be flooded with beats from a type of music or lyrics from a certain band. Did Gorgeous Sunsets, The Whiskey A Go-Go, Malibu's Beach, Kahlua, Stunning Women, the Santa Monica Pier, Universal Studios, Board Shorts, The Viper Room, Longboards, Sunset Boulevard, or The Hollywood Sign make any appearances as well? Many iconic Southern California bands will always be associated with a simple yet alluring theme: having a good time. Hell, you could even see the fun in the titles of some of these songs. California Girls, Life in the Fast Lane, Girls, 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 Paradise City. Oftentimes, even the melancholic tracks still find a way to entice the listener ever so slightly towards the dangers down the 101 or the 405. Some people might opt for a late checkout if they were staying at the Hotel California. Despite being all alone under a bridge, Anthony Kiedis still takes solace knowing L.A. will always be there for him. But few local groups choose to dive into the hardships that serve as the taxes for living in this beautiful climate. If Motley Crue's Dr. Feelgood was the Hollywood telling of the Southern California lifestyle, The Offspring Smash was the independent documentary. The anxiety and tension pumping through this record is palpable. You can hear the frustration boiling to a fever pitch. The lyrics and music act as two bloody fists punching a brick wall. And the fact it came packaged and sold from an independent record company made it all that more compelling. But despite the poignant themes on this album, The Offspring were not trying to ignite a cultural or musical revolution. When Smash came out, Holland was already 28 with 2 degrees from USC. Noodles was 31 and worked as a janitor at a Garden Grove elementary school. When this record continued to grow in popularity, Holland needed to ponder if touring was worth delaying obtaining another PhD from SC. Noodles was apprehensive about giving up his janitorial duties, as that would mean stunting his health insurance and pension. Even when the band was on a major label and touring their 1996 record, Ixnay on the Hombre, Noodles was still waiting for the day he would need to put down his guitar and pick up the broom. But that day never came. Dexter Holland would earn his third degree from SC in 2017, which has to make him the most learned man in punk rock. The Offspring had a new record out in 2024, titled Supercharged, and are still touring. But 3 decades later, they are most defined by Smash. And for good reason. Many people might consider Orange County the last place to birth a punk record to include song titles like Genocide and So Alone. Isn't the area filled with Spicoli stoner surfers? Yes, we have our fair share of those characters too. But we have our hardships as well. It is not just always expressed by our musicians. The consequences of drugs, especially for young people, the pressure to succeed in anything you do, there's always going to be someone more in shape, wealthier, smarter, more athletic, better looking than you. Seeing certain areas riddled with the homeless and kids already off the straightened path, the constant comparing you do with your classmates and neighbors, being around the elite of society can wear you down. You'll never truly be good enough. Growing up in this area, you are regularly exposed to people barely hanging on in life, and those whose lifestyle looks unattainable. Worry can seep into your head very early on. I don't want to end up like him. I'll never end up with someone like her. The Offspring Smash brilliantly taps into those fears and turns them on their head. The heavy themes intertwined with the tenacious musical elements helps create a euphoric punk rock roller coaster ride. Rather than ignoring these problems to then have these issues fester even more so, or opt to pretend like they do not exist and create a false sense that everything is peaches and cream, the Offspring decide to address these realities head on. This album lives on as a critical piece of understanding Southern California culture, while so many classic albums from local bands brush through the surface level of what it looks like to be from here. The Offspring tread into a much deeper set of water, the kind most people are too nervous to venture out to shine light on often overlooked aspects of growing up here. Now, of course, you can get a sense of California living from Sublime proclaiming that lovin' is what I got, and the Beach Boys hypothesizing that everyone would be surfing if they had access to the ocean. None of these ideas and themes go up in smoke just because Holland screams out, the more you suffer, the more it shows you really care. But Smash serves as a crucial cultural contribution to explain to an outsider there is more to coming of age in Southern California, specifically Orange County, than pretty smiles and fish tacos. And the fact the album broke through the underground to bloom out to a grassroots phenomenon is really poignant. This album is not a Beverly Hills record executive's view of the California dream, nor was the tale from a handsome rocker from Hollywood. It was the reality told from the perspective of 4 guys that formed in a truly working class city. Aspirations varied from PhDs to janitorial work, but the common denominator was they seemed hesitant to buy into the idea that this music thing was going to become a career. And it was that attitude and that story that drove Smash to move over 11 million units without the backing of a major label's resources. Ultimately, everyone experiences some hardships from their hometown. Nobody's life is void of problems, regardless of what you see on social media or see portrayed in the big screen. And while I was fortunate to grow up where I did, the Offspring Smash articulates very real components of living just down the road from the happiest place on earth. And that does it for this episode of Don't Scratch the Vinyl. So now just a few housekeeping items as I wrap up. Please follow the show on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at DSTVPod. So the initials for the show, Don't Scratch the Vinyl, and then pod, short for podcast. Facebook page is Don't Scratch the Vinyl Podcast. I'll be adding clips and additional content to those channels, especially now that I got a few in the bank. All episodes will be now available on YouTube going forward. If I'm again solo next time, I'll be discussing Bob Dylan's Highway 61, as the iconic album turns 60 on August 30th. So I have another album I'm holding on to in perpetuity, and just seeing if I could eventually get a guest for it. If not, I can do that one solo anytime, honestly. Very prepared for it. But if I decide to go with Bob Dylan and it works out for my schedule, I'm really looking forward to diving back into that side of his story, as my playlists have contained quite a few of his songs since high school. And also, after watching A Complete Unknown last year, which is set around this point of Dylan's life, I'm even more so of diving headfirst right back into the music on that record. And that show will be recorded sometime in the next couple of weeks if I decide to rock with Bob Dylan, and that will be around the anniversary celebration of the record. So, thanks again for listening. I truly appreciate it. Hopefully you got something out of this show if you were a longtime fan of The Offspring or did not know much about them before listening. Please share along with friends, family. Every little bit helps so I continue to grow and refine this program. I just hope I did The Offspring story justice, as they are a key band in the history of alternative music and obviously mean a lot to my home area. So thanks again for hanging out and listening to me ramble about one of the best punk bands America has ever produced and one of my personal favorites. And please remember this, above all else, if you take one thing from the show, remember, you rock, and don't let anyone ever tell you different.